The Chernobyl disaster occurred on April 26, 1986. Hundreds and thousands of advanced minds are still eliminating the results of the worst man-made disaster in the history of the planet today. The cleanup figures are only approximate. It is said that as many as 800,000 people were cleaned up, 10,000 died and another 70,000 were left disabled for life, although even this figure may be an underestimate. About 10 million people from Ukraine and the European Union fell under the deleterious effects of the explosion. On April 27, 1986, Pripyat was evacuated, with 47,500 people living there. Further on, all inhabitants of the explosion zone within a radius of 10 kilometers were evacuated. Even later, a 30-kilometer exclusion zone was formed, and the total number of people evacuated was 116,000. Incredible fires continued for 10 days after the explosion. During this interval, 380 million curies of contaminated radioactive elements were released into the air. The releases were so strong that they fell even in the Leningrad region and Czechoslovakia. Further contamination was detected in Scandinavian countries. It took 3 months to eliminate the results of the emergency. Stories that there are many mystical creatures in Chernobyl do not correspond to reality. There are no two-headed deer in the exclusion zone, cats the size of wolves, and the eyes of local animals do not glow with phosphorus in the dark. But the zone is still dangerous due to the high risk of succumbing to radioactive radiation. There is now an incredible influx of tourists in Pripyat. The zone has become popularized, largely due to the Chernobyl TV series. Some tourists are not strangers to even filming music videos in Pripyat. Let's walk together through the places of the largest man-made disaster of humanity in the past and find out what is happening in Chernobyl now, what was hidden from outsiders behind barbed wire for so long. One cannot enter the zone just like that. Staying long at a checkpoint, you have to wait until your documents are finally returned after a thorough check. What lies ahead is a terrifyingly unknown truth waiting just beyond the barrier. The people in their military uniforms and vehicles give you a slight shiver of excitement about the walk ahead. There is trepidation in the air. The level considered a safe dose of radiation is 0.3 μsV per hour. Less than a kilometer from the checkpoint it reaches a value of 0.6, causing mild anxiety throughout the body. The first place we went was the decontamination point. Leaving the bus we walk along a forest belt, which is lined with concrete slabs, which remind of the former presence of civilization here in Pripyat. The crunch of dry leaves, singing birds, splashing water in the lakes nearby, but not a soul around. A little further on, we saw a huge array of the remaining 7 platforms and trestles for cars. In 1986 the equipment leaving the exclusion zone was being cleaned of radioactive dust and dirt here all day long. Emergency workers were in the water up to their knees. They toiled despite burns that at times eroded their skin to the bone as they cleaned the equipment. Few of them lost their health here, on this very spot where we are. Most lost their lives. These were chemical warfare units. But the radiation was so severe that the suits simply didn't help. The auto shop next to the cleaning platforms had been empty for years. It looked like a simple derelict of an ordinary city, though it was not. There was much surprise when the lush moss growing nearby was discovered. The media claimed that the vegetation and fauna in the zone remained virtually untouched after the disaster, and now even more so, the influx of wild animals is incredibly large. In the Chernobyl zone, not only equipment was cleaned up, but also entire buildings and homes. Special equipment stopped near them and watered them with a powerful head of ordinary water. Liquidators used shovels and picks to remove the top layer of soil and transport it on trucks behind the forest floor. In the village of Kapachi, however, things were much worse. The people's dwellings were pulled to the ground, down to the last remaining one. They were made of wood. It seemed impossible to wash away the radiation. As well as to imagine the emotions of people who learned that they would never, ever return to their home because it no longer existed. Of the remaining brick buildings in Kapachi, there was only a garden for children. Without windows, all ruined and settled. If you go inside, it may seem that a war took place here. Scattered dolls with clothes on the ground, rotten, rusted cribs, and you only guess at the fate of the children who were here. All the doors are broken and creaking, creepy drafts in every corner of the nursery, the rustling of leaves on the floor, and the feeling as if someone is watching you with little baby eyes. After walking a little deeper into the kindergarten, the radiation meter bursts. Its norm exceeds 27 times. We walk away along streets that have not been cleaned for 30 years. Passing the crossing of the River Uz, we learn that the stalkers call it protocol. It is so called because this place is unfortunate for lovers of adventure and thrills. Here the local authorities are constantly catching outlaw tourists crossing the river. We are in the redwood forest. It is so called because radioactive radiation eradicated everything that existed here, and every tree is painted a dead reddish hue. It is hard to believe that there was life here once, kingdom of animals and plants. Everything that grew here has been cut down and buried in the soil, though the forest still greets us with its reddish hue and powerful meter readings. The level of radiation in this place exceeds 60 times. From a nearby concrete unloading site, specialists created the first sarcophagus at the nuclear power plant. We follow everything straight towards the north and find ourselves in the heart of the disaster, Chernobyl. Everyone thinks this town is extinct, but about 3,500 people still live here. Most of them are Chernobyl shift workers, working under contract, leaving this city, which has endured thousands of horrors and deaths, when it expires. It was strange to learn about the several hundred residents who returned here after the accidents. Weren't they terrified of experiencing all that the people of 86 had been subjected to? What was it like to see a city once living in bloom and grace practically dead? Our main goal was Pripyat, so we never learned the answer to these questions. Cafes, empty lifeless roads, ruined walls with broken windows, perpetually open doors, fear could attack with every new sound. Driving further ahead, 5-story panel houses with adjoining courtyards appeared before us. They were all designed in neat lines, with a sense of nostalgia for Soviet times. We got out of the car onto the central square. The air was quite fresh. Opposite us rose the culture center, energetic. To the side of it, the hotel policy. The tall building across the street 30 years ago people called the White House. Local party members and Chernobyl leaders used to meet there. Despite its past, everything around it was lifelessly destroyed and reverberated with the echoes of the disaster. On our way to the hospital there was an abandoned park whose rides had not moved since the explosion in 1986. The radiation level of the cars on the children's playground exceeded the norm by 20 times. The main Chernobyl workers were taken to the hospital around the clock. The walls of the hospital screamed with the pain of thousands of wounded and dead. Death enveloped the air that reigned here, and fear of the past permeated our minds. The guide told us that the hospital's underground still contains the overalls of the station's workers. Only a few risk going down. The radiation levels in the basements are so high that some come out contaminated. It's as if the apocalypse has passed through the area. We head toward the source of the tragedy, reactor number 4, which claimed the first lives of that April. The structure, gleaming in the sunlight, looks more like an arc. An arch covers the 4th, deadly reactor. This dome is 106 meters high and was installed in the fall of 2016. Despite the fact that the power plant has been out of operation for 19 years, there are still workers at Chernobyl. They are fixing the consequences of that fatal explosion that caused so many disasters. The power plant area is guarded by internal Ukrainian special forces. There are barbed wire fences and warning signs along the entire area, and the radiation detector shows an excess of only 4.5 times. Unit 4 is practically invisible. We saw newfangled art near the sarcophagus. Standing on the bridge over the pond that cools the power plant, we managed to feed large catfish. Life is slowly coming back to these places, even in the polluted water. At the end of our journey we found ourselves near the Duga radio location station. It used to be designed to detect long-range missiles. Now it's a faded 150-meter piece of metal that's only a local landmark, and it's constantly falling apart. The alloys of the structure are eaten by rust, and at the bottom of the towers we saw huge bolts that have fallen out of the structure. The most desperate tourists dare to climb up and look down on the empty, gloomy city. That's the end of our trip through the Chernobyl exclusion zone. We did not get to see the mutated plants or animals, but we learned something more, how by chance an entire city, once bustling with life, remained completely empty, to hear the echo of its sad history, full of troubles and broken lives. In memory of the firefighters in Pripyat there is a monument made by the liquidators of the consequences of the disaster. The monument is made of the same concrete that covered the emergency power unit. Every visitor to Pripyat considers it his duty to take a photo against a large concrete sign installed at the entrance to the city. If you were interested, thank the author by putting a like. And also do not forget to subscribe so as not to miss the outputs of even more interesting videos of my channel. Turn on notifications by clicking on the bell and share this video with your friends. What else interesting can you add to this video? Write in the comments, it will be interesting to read.